we welcome women from across the African continent and the diaspora throughout the world. We have registrants for today's event from over 100 countries around the world and from over 40 countries on the continent of Africa in particular. I'm Teresa Clark, and I am the founder and CEO of Africa.com. It's my privilege to be able to bring to you today's session. This is the third session that we have had in partnership with Gorick Ng. Gorick is the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The Unspoken Rules: Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. When I personally became aware of Gorick's work, I was impressed with what he has done to identify those unspoken rules, as the title of his book is called, that help people when they are just getting started in their career, particularly in the corporate sector, to understand the codes, those things that nobody might teach you if you didn't grow up in a household where your parents or older siblings worked in the corporate world. There's a ton that is assumed. There's a ton that your bosses and your colleagues expect you to know. But going beyond that, there's just a lot that you can do to think about how to make sure you're getting the right visibility and positioning yourself for success. I'm a huge fan of Gorick's, and we're really thrilled that he's going to take you through a very interactive session. Before we start with Gorick, however, I wanted to bring on one of our favorite CEOs from the Africa.com definitive list of women CEOs. This list is a list that we have published now in its third year of women in Africa who are the heads of organizations that are publicly listed with revenue in excess of $100 million. Last year's list had Aminata Kane on it. Aminata was the CEO of Orange Sierra Leone. Aminata has gone beyond that now, however, and moved to an even bigger job where she is in charge of all of the mobile money across the African continent and the Middle East for Orange, which is a huge platform. And so we like to bring some of our own women from our list to share with you their secrets to success. And so it is my absolute privilege to welcome Aminata. This is not the first time she's been with us. I've had a chance to spend some time with her and become a huge fan. She also has an entrepreneurial spirit, having started a business in the fashion industry. She herself is an angel investor across the continent and just an overall wonderful person who also manages to accomplish all that she does and have a husband and 3 small children, including 1 new baby. So I just have to really hand it over to Aminata. She's a role model for every young woman hoping to achieve the highest ranking of success within the corporate sector. Welcome, Aminata.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much. I'm very humbled by everything you said. I'm blushing now.
Well, Aminata, tell us, I think that those who are with us today, we've got over 600 right now, the numbers are growing. Please tell us, what is the story? How did you find your way to the top ranks of the corporate world in Africa? Where did you start and how did you get there?
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm also a huge fan of yours and what you're doing with Africa.com. So thank you very much for having me, and hi to everyone from wherever you're connecting. Thank you to the women and the men who are connected, because I saw some male names, so I'm very happy to see that they're also part of this discussion. So it started very commonly. I grew up between France and Senegal. My parents moved back to the continent very early because they wanted us to be grounded and rooted. So I grew up mostly in Senegal, and I went to study in France, very typical background. I went to business school, started working in consulting. I did 2 years at McKinsey, started working on the continent because I was very interested in it, right? I wanted to have some exposure there, understand better, because growing up in the country and working in the country are 2 different things. And this is one of the things that I would like to discuss later about the things that you might have misconceptions about in your career. Growing up in the country and working in the country are very different things. So I did that for a couple of years, and I wanted to stop the consulting job and transition into more operational work. But before that, I went to do an MBA in the US. I was fortunate to get into MIT, which has a fantastic entrepreneurial spirit. And I launched a business in Africa, in Senegal, when I was still a student there. And I got married. I got married when I was during my MBA. And so I moved back to the continent because of love. It started like this. My husband was there. He was in Senegal. He told me, I love you, but I don't love living in the US. So how about you move back? So I moved back because of love. That was my first driver. And reality hit in. When I moved back, I had to reduce my salary by half, cut my salary. The difference between working there and working in Europe in terms of financial compensation was different. It was big. But to me, it was, if as long as I could pay my bills and my MBA loan, it was fine. I think it was not my biggest thing was not how to make the biggest salary, but it was how much experience I can get. And I was 27 at the time. And we didn't have kids, so I was asset light, if I can say so. But it was important for me to get some experience, on the ground experience. So that's how I joined Orange 10 years ago, a little bit over 10, no, just 10 years ago, and started very low. I decided that it would be okay for me to go, not to be having a bigger position, but to accept to go to a lower position for me to learn, and a lower salary for me to learn, and to prove that I was able to work on the continent, and I was able to work from an operational point of view. So that's what I negotiated. I said, please give me something that I can cover my bill, and give me something tangible that I can work on, and a project that I could then show that I can achieve something tangible, even if it's little, and then you give me something bigger later, but I want something tangible that I can prove that I'm working. So that's how I started. I started by doing marketing projects, and marketing project monitoring. Then I got an opportunity to become director for strategy and marketing for Orange Money in Senegal. It was a big battle against competition. We won it. And then somebody gave me a chance to become CEO in Sierra Leone. Not a lot of people took the job, were accepting the job at the time. It was a very complicated job in a very complicated market. We had taken over from a competitor from another company a few years back, but it was in a very tough state, and expatriation was not necessarily in Sierra Leone was not necessarily appealing to everybody. But I decided to take the chance and take the risk. After seriously discussing with my husband, because we had 2 young kids at the time, we had to decide who would be taking care of them. Would they come with me? Would they be staying in Senegal? We made a decision that they would be staying in Senegal while I would be commuting. It was very hard from a family perspective, but I did that. And then they joined me in Sierra Leone. We're there for a few years. And then I needed to do something else. I needed to take a break, which is what I've done for a year.
It's quite a story. I mean, there aren't many women who would leave their children in another country in order to, but the opportunity to be a CEO of Orange Sierra Leone, especially so early in your career, you can understand why this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And certainly we've seen that the work that we've done with CEOs like yourself, one of the things that's become very consistent is that for women with families, they can't do it unless they have a supportive partner. That just seems to be a necessary part of the equation. And I think no more so than in your case. And, kudos to not only you, but to your husband and to your family for the support that they have given you for you to achieve the great heights that you've achieved, because it's clearly not a one-woman show. It's a collective from your family, and is particularly a very supportive husband, which is fantastic.
I couldn't agree more. I think that he's been extremely supportive, not only in terms of letting me try to achieve something bigger than myself, but also making sure that I was not feeling so guilty about it. But don't get me wrong, I was crying every time I was leaving Senegal to go to Sierra Leone to work, which is why after the kids came to stay with me for a couple of years, and it was fantastic. It was good for them. And my husband was commuting at the time, so he was heartbroken every time as well when he had to travel back to Senegal when we were in Freetown. So it's been very rough on the family, but it was also something that I needed to do. I needed to do it. It was hard, but I needed to do that for myself, for my daughter, who is 6 years old now, but for my daughter to know that she can definitely take a job and achieve something very complicated and hard, but also rewarding. And the mission really drove me and drove my whole family. So it was definitely a family affair.
Well, it's a wonderful and inspiring story. So, Aminata, we promised to get you out of here shortly. So let me move on to the next question. The next question I have for you is, what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make early in their careers?
I would say that the first mistake that I see people do is to be in a hurry and counting time instead of counting projects and missions accomplished. So people will say, I've been 2 years in a job, this is enough, I want to move on to something else, right? And for me, it's not a matter of how much time you spend on the job, it's a matter of what have you achieved. So can you tell me how many projects you've successfully led that have some impact? Are you done with the current projects that you are leading? Are you done with the mission that we've tasked you with? Do you see that there are results to what you are doing? Rather than you spend 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Somebody can spend a year and achieve so much, and this person will be able to move on in their career rather than stay on the job. While some people will have to be there for 5 years before they complete something that is meaningful. So that would be the first mistake that I've seen, and I hear a lot. The second time is spending a lot of time in corporate jobs and not in operational jobs, right? So I believe that you strongly need to have a taste of the field and of operational matters to be a very good corporate person. So I always encourage people to go and be in the operations, be on the field, work in the small opcos, etc. So I think it's useful. The third thing is definitely thinking about the big jobs or the big names, or I'm part of this and this and this, instead of something that is useful and impactful. For me, when I was appointed in Sierra Leone, I can tell you, I was not part of the top exco or the top candidates, but I had done a lot of things on the ground that were very good. I had a track record on something tangible, and they knew that I would be flexible and I would learn fast. So that made, I think, way more than somebody who had been in an exco for decades, with achievements, but not as tangible, not as clear. And I think that really people should think about that rather than being on talking about titles and time on the job, etc. I think this is important.
Very good. And Aminata, what do you wish that you had known in your first 5 years in the corporate world that you now know?
First is the importance of a spouse, right? So whoever wants to have a family and want to get married to somebody, know that your husband, especially as a woman, know that your husband is going to be one of the most important defining factor of your career. If you have a supportive husband, you'll be able to go very far. If you have somebody who's not comfortable with having a woman who has a career, it's going to be very complicated. So the choice of the partner, the spouse, especially for women, is defining when it comes to career. So I think that will be the first. The second thing is to understand that you can climb the ladder with others and not by stepping on others. I do not believe in sharks, in you being lonely, the only one person succeeding. You succeed as a team. You don't succeed by yourself. And you also bring along people when you can. If you see people who are hardworking, doing great things, bring them along, because it's really lonely at the top. And you will need people who you date back, who you've been able to support in the past. For me, it's extremely important to build your alliances, but beyond that, build friendship. It's very lonely at the top. And if you have people you can trust because you've been with them for years and you are able to help them when you had the opportunity, do it, because this is going to be extremely valuable over your career. And last thing is that there is a huge incentive for you to climb to the top, because and to become a manager or director or something, is because you're more flexible. And when you are more flexible, when you decide what your calendar should look like, you have time for your kids. You can take a day off for this. You can work from home when you want to. You don't depend so much on somebody else's calendar, and you can save some time for yourself and for your family, and for things that are of interest to you. So there is this incentive. The responsibility is huge, but also the flexibility is better.
Wow, very good advice. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to let you get back to work. Something that someone has asked, this is a question coming from the audience, which I think you are particularly well suited to respond to. And this is someone who is from the diaspora and then came back home to a Muslim country and wants you to talk in particular about what it's like to be a corporate leader as a woman in a Muslim country.
Interesting question. I think that no matter where you're going, you also have to understand that there are cultural norms, right? So what are the cultural norms of the country that you are going in? That things that will be acceptable and things that are absolutely not acceptable. I myself, though, as you can see, I don't wear a scarf. I don't wear the hijab, though I'm a Muslim person and I do fasting. So it doesn't necessarily, I would not say that I'm very conservative, but I do pay attention very much to the cultural norms in every country that I go to. When I work in Sierra Leone, or if I work in Cote d'Ivoire, or if I work in New Zealand or wherever, I pay attention to the codes and the things that are unsaid. And you can only do that by asking questions and spending time, not with the expatriates community, but also with the local community. Listening very carefully to people, the feedback that people are giving to you, because it can be a huge hindrance to your work if you don't understand the cultural norms and if you don't understand the cultural subtleties. So I would say that for me, in general, being very aware of where I am and paying extreme attention to understanding clearly and honestly and sincerely the country where I'm in is helping me being a better CEO, because people will not tell you everything when you are a leader or manager. People will not tell you everything, but if you listen, they will be able to tell you. Also, being in a Muslim country or being in a country that has different cultural backgrounds or different, it's important to understand them, and you will adjust accordingly by staying yourself. But you also have to understand why not hurting the country, the culture of the country you're in is critical.
Well, I think that's very well said, Aminata, and I don't want to pick on Muslim countries. You know, I spent part of my corporate career in the United States and have seen many similar challenges. So I don't think that there is a mecca for women in any part of the world, although I do appreciate that the Muslim countries may present some unique challenges, but we're not there yet anywhere. Aminata, you've been very generous with your time and your knowledge. Thank you for joining us today. I know we will want to have you back again. There's all sorts of positive feedback about your brief remarks today. I think it's not enough. We'll do something else with you again in the future, but you are such an inspiration to many, and we're so proud of you for having achieved this latest promotion. And we wish you every success in your new job, working across the continent and the Middle East. That's a huge portfolio, and we can't wait to see how you do with this and what your next step is.
I will try my best, but thank you so much. I was very happy to be with you today. We're very honored as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aminata.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, what a great start to today's session. And I think that it's always wonderful to hear from a woman who inspires us, so we know what we're talking about when Gorik comes to give us the tactical plans, the tactical steps that we have to take to get there. We know where everyone wants to go, and that's where Aminata has been and is. So with that, Gorik, I'm going to ask you to come back online. And again, I introduced Gorik at the beginning. And, I just want to, say another word about Gorik. Obviously this work, we are Africa.com. We do this work for women in Africa. And I find that, a Chinese guy from America. And you say, who is this guy? Why is he there? Well, once you spend some time with him today, I know we have many who were with us the first time and have had an opportunity to be exposed to Gorik. But once you listen to what he has to say and he works with us, you'll see exactly why we're so thrilled to host Gorik over and over again on Africa.com, because he has some tremendous insights and his own story is a very humble one. Gorik, let me provide a little bit more background and then I'm just going to hand it to you. Gorik's background, he comes from a very modest background. His mother was a domestic worker, and Gorik helped his mom clean toilets when he was in high school. And he learned a great deal of humility through that. He went on to be accepted at Harvard College and then Harvard Business School. And then he got his first corporate job in a very prestigious management consulting firm. And he recognized when he got there that it wasn't just about being smart and the good grades that he had earned in school, that there was a whole cultural dynamic to being accepted in that world and knowing what to do, what steps to take, what not to do. And that is what prompted his interest in this space. And so he has now dedicated himself to being a career counselor at a couple of universities, at Harvard University, at the University of California, Berkeley, and to writing the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, The Rules, Unspoken Secrets to starting your career off right. So with no further introduction, I'm going to put you in the very good hands of Gorik to take us through the balance of this session. Gorik, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for having me back, to the entire Africa.com team, and to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Time is money, and I just so deeply appreciate that you're taking the time to spend the next few minutes with me as we talk about a topic that Aminata had set up very well, which is the topic of how to stand out, how to make an impact, and how to get promoted, and ultimately how to go from where you are to where you want to go in your career. And this is research based on my recent book, The Unspoken Rules: Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right, which you learn more about at Gorik.com. Now, I was listening to Aminata's super inspiring words and story, and I couldn't help but feel like actually the title of this session is not fully accurate, or it doesn't tell the full story, because the word that Aminata had used was alliances. And when I think about the topic that I would like to share with you all today, it really is about the unspoken rules of building alliances. And I'm going to talk a bit more about why that is shortly. But I'm seeing, my goodness, 1,000 people from across the African continent and around the world joining us today. I'm curious who is with us today, and I would like for all of you to join me in submitting a poll. Go ahead and go aim your camera apps at this QR code, or if you're on your browser, go on to pollev.com/GORICK. I'm going to go ahead and also copy and paste this link into our chat window. But please go ahead and join me in answering this question, which is, where are you currently right now? And if you have a 2-word country or location, such as South Africa, go ahead and put an underscore so that the word cloud that will appear will see it as 1 word. So go ahead, once again, pollev.com/GORICK. I'm going to go ahead and type this out myself into the chat window so you can all see. And I'm seeing a number of people also. If you don't have access to another tab, go ahead and type it out in the chat window as well. I'm seeing Nairobi, Kenya, I'm seeing Nigeria, Botswana, Tanzania, Australia, Sierra Leone, Turkey. Fantastic. So great to see so many of you from all around the world. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next page just to see who has answered. And my goodness, look at that. Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, the United States, Ohio, Sudan, the United Kingdom, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon. I'm seeing China, Algeria, Senegal, Angola, France, Ottawa, Canada, Libya. Fantastic. Amazing to see just how diverse of a community we have here today. Now, I want you to stay on the poll because I'm going to have a number more in today's session. And I want to ask you actually the next poll right now. And the next poll is this. Please, everyone, stay on that tab that I just shared with you. And please go ahead and share with me, what is your primary professional goal right now? Again, pollev.com/GORICK. Once you answer one poll, please go ahead and stay on that poll because that page will automatically update. If it asks for your name, go ahead and click skip. If it asks for cookies, go ahead and click accept. All of the polls in today's session are completely anonymous. And I'm seeing here that 47% of you, about half of you here in this 1,000-strong community want to move up. And I'm going to share with you tactics on how to do so. 3% of you want to move internally, so move to a different department. 19% of you, 20% of you want to move externally. 27% of you want to thrive, step up, take on more important responsibilities in my current role. And 2% of you are looking to survive, keep up in my current role. I can see a great deal of ambition just in seeing the bars that are appearing here on the screen. Now I'm curious, you have big goals, you have big dreams. What are you currently struggling with most professionally right now? And the options here, you can select all that apply to you. Are you struggling to get promoted, to speak up, to manage your workload, to deal with challenging coworkers, to build relationships, to get promoted, to stay motivated? I'm seeing here actually a pretty even split across the different categories, somewhere between 10 and 20% of all of you struggling with each of these. Now, I asked you this question because, as was the case for me and so many professionals that I've interviewed and researched, we have a lot juggling. We have a lot going on. But I'm curious now, if you had to pick the one issue, the one challenge, the one struggle, the one anxiety, the one uncertainty, what is the one thing that you are struggling with most? And I'm seeing here as well a pretty big variety. If you can only pick one, I'm seeing a pretty strong distribution here across a lot of these different categories. Very interesting to see. Some of you struggling to manage your workload, some of you struggling to build relationships, struggling to get promoted, struggling to stay motivated. Now, I hope I'll be able to at least touch upon many of these, because in the end, all of these matter. But let me share with you, well, why? Why did I start off with all of these polls? Well, it's because my goal in this session is to give you the tools to reach your goals, whatever they happen to be. And why me? Well, Teresa was so generous in sharing with you that while I was in many of your shoes before, even though I may not have had the same lived experience as you, I've seen a lot, I've experienced a lot, mostly the struggles, and I've made it my life's work to help others in our shoes as well. Now, Teresa was so generous in sharing with you the serious biography about myself. And if you were to go on to LinkedIn, which I encourage all of you to do and to connect with me and to stay in touch with me, you'll see that I graduated from Harvard. I worked on Wall Street in financial services. I became a management consultant at Boston Consulting Group. I got my MBA at Harvard Business School. I wrote a book with Harvard Business Review called The Unspoken Rules. And I'm now teaching the unspoken rules at the University of California, Berkeley. But this is what you see on LinkedIn. And we all know that social media is not real life. What you don't see is the fact that I was raised by a working class single mother, the fact that she was laid off and I ended up needing to apply to jobs on her behalf, but realizing that there were a lot of unspoken rules that no one had ever taught me about how to be seen, be heard, be remembered, be selected, and to be promoted. And it wasn't until I arrived at Harvard here as a first-year student and that I arrived in corporate America that I realized that so many of these unspoken rules are whispered to us from older siblings to younger siblings, from parents to their children. And one of the experiences that I had was the opposite experience, perhaps, of what Aminata had shared. Aminata earlier had said that she was selected, that someone saw potential in her to take on the CEO role. And so the opportunity in some ways came to her, even though, of course, she had put in a great deal of hard work into building her career. And this actually came to expose me to the unspoken rules for the first time myself, where I was still sitting at my first desk in my first job, and a coworker was sitting next to me who had started at the same time. And one of the senior members of the firm had come up to her and said, "Let's get lunch." And several weeks later, this lunch meeting ended up turning into a big project that was not advertised, and later on, a very quick promotion as well. And I was sitting there beside my colleague, still setting up my laptop, but wondering, how is it that I didn't think my job had even begun, and already I was feeling behind? And it turns out that a lot of what I was taught growing up was not exactly transferable to the corporate world, where if you're working in the service sector, if you're working in a factory job, what matters most is your ability to put your head down, do the hard work, and let your hard work speak for itself. However, what I didn't realize was, well, there's so much more about being seen and being heard. And at the time, I just found it challenging. And I started wondering, am I alone? And it was this one question that led to me interviewing over 500 professionals, including across the African continent, on what they wish someone had told them sooner about how to accelerate their careers. And while I shared with you the first, that was me. I was the first in my family to pursue a corporate job. But I'm curious for you, in what ways are you the first in your community? In what ways are you the first to do something? Or in what ways are you the first in your community to do something? In what ways are you the first among your family and siblings to do something? Go ahead, join me on pollev.com/GORICK. In what ways are you the first and you feel maybe a little bit lonely in this process? We have a first-time business owner, the first to graduate with a first class in my family, the first to graduate with a PhD, the first to work in a corporation, the first to get a degree, the first female banker in my town, congratulations, the first physician, the first child, the first to pursue an international career, the first to want to start a business, the first to live and work in the UK, the first to study outside of our country, to pursue a PhD, to pursue a higher education, to pursue entrepreneurship, to attain a PhD, and to have a master's degree. We can see here that there is so much that really defines our community here as trailblazers, as people who might not know very much because we don't know those unspoken rules, but we're making our families proud, we're making our communities proud, we're making our countries proud, we're making our schools proud, we're making the field of science proud, and the field of nonprofit proud. And there's a lot that you should be proud of. There's also a lot that we need to navigate as the first. And so, whereas I started off my journey feeling like the first was, well, of course, an anxiety-provoking, an anxious, a lonely experience. I want you to also, first of all, take pride in the fact that you're first, that you are a trailblazer. But as I said, there's so much that comes with being the first. And that is to navigate life and work and these unspoken rules. So let me go ahead and share with you the story of Annie, who was also the first. But over the course of meeting a mentor, was able to navigate her way to an accelerated promotion, to more important responsibilities, and ultimately to the career that she wanted. And this is taken from chapter 2 of my book, The Unspoken Rules. So Annie had joined an oil and gas company, and she joined as an entry-level marketing analyst. And fast forward, and she ended up getting promoted. In fact, she got invited by a senior executive, by the CEO of the company, to join a strategic partnerships team in a department that hadn't existed, in a role that was new. And when I heard about Annie's story, I thought, wow, how is it that she was so easily able to go from here to here? And when I observed, well, her external narrative, what she told everyone else, it was a big black box. But as I got to know Annie a bit more and I asked her additional questions about what she did, I started realizing that she actually took several steps quite methodically. The first was, well, she did her job fully, accurately, and promptly. And this is an essential part of any role. You need to do your job well. You need to do your job promptly. And you need to be able to push deadlines and projects through to the finish line. But that is just the price of admission. I thought initially that that was the only requirement to getting promoted, when really it's only that just first step. What I learned later was actually she had learned about a team that she was interested in joining, but she had heard as well that they were not hiring. This was a new team. It was an exclusive team. But over the advice of a mentor, she realized that perhaps she could cold email the head of the team. And so she spent some time, went back to her desk, went back to her laptop, and cold emailed and introduced herself to the senior vice president of this team and said, hello, my name is Annie. I'm an entry-level oil and gas marketing analyst on this team. In university, I actually studied the very topic that you are now working on. And as I think about what I'd like to do in the future, I'd love to be able to contribute to the very area that you are now trying to build, this new office somewhere else. And this data analytics function, actually, that was going to power the way that they approached partnership building. Now, initially, she received no response. And her initial reaction was, well, discouragement of, well, maybe I'm not important enough. Maybe I actually made a misstep in cold emailing this person. And so she got discouraged. But over the course of getting to know her mentor, she realized, well, it may just be that the senior vice president was too busy. So she sent a follow-up email. And from the second email, the senior vice president then said, you know, we're not hiring right now, unfortunately. This is too early in our time as a team. However, I'm standing up a volunteer initiative, a women's book club in our company. And I would love for you to join this book club. Now, at the start, Annie thought, oh, this is not what I signed up for. I'm really looking to join a strategic partnerships team in this data analytics role. This book club, it seems completely irrelevant to me. But she thought, you know, who knows what could come of this experience? And so she decided to join. And what she realized was that actually she became the youngest person in this book club. And the senior vice president was actually looking for a right-hand woman to lead this book club. And fast forward several weeks, and she became the primary email sender, the primary convener, the primary organizer of this women's book club that involved the senior vice president, as well as senior leaders who were multiple layers above her in the organization. And as a result, she had senior level exposure that many people did not have. So she took on this leadership role. She did a good job. And fast forward several weeks, it turns out that the senior vice president really did have a vacancy. And after having built trust, after having shown her potential to the senior vice president and to all these senior executives in the company, it was an easy selection. She was the first pick to join this team. Now, of course, success is not linear. There are going to be good days and bad days, good jobs and bad jobs, good managers and bad managers. But over the course of these ups and downs, what I want for you to have are the mindsets and skills to be able to take this upward trajectory instead of this downward trajectory. And so the question becomes, what did Annie understand that others did not about building a successful career where she got an accelerated promotion? She also was able to make an impact and actually find herself being even more motivated than ever before because she was actually working on the work that she wanted to do. So many of the goals that you had mentioned to me just now. And I actually realized that what Annie understood that others did not is that self-help, especially as a woman in corporate America, is unfortunately not enough. There is some interesting research coming out of a nonprofit named Catalyst. And the research was back in 2001, but it's unfortunately just as relevant today. And the report says, the myth of the ideal worker: does doing all of the right things really get women ahead? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. That you can do your job and do it well and do all of the right things. But what you need to get ahead is a sponsor, is someone high up in the organization who says, I know this person, I trust this person, and I want them on my team. I want them to get this life-changing, career-building opportunity. And so when I think about what Annie did, it was about her job, yes, but it was more about how she navigated the organization. And the first step that she did was she was aware, first of all, of the hidden opportunities that are around us all the time. The second step was she was proactive about going from invisible to visible and going from turning strangers into allies and beyond. You know, it was very hard for this opportunity to come her way if no one knew that she even existed. The first step, or the second step here, is to even just let people know that you exist. And then the third step is to be persistent, to make this a habit of being seen, of being heard, and being known, especially to those who have the decision-making power to elevate you to a higher level, the level that you deserve. And so it's 1, 2, 3, be aware, be proactive, be persistent. And it's taking these steps one by one and then making it a habit. And I hear this in Aminata's story as well, of being aware of not just opportunities in her organization, but globally, being proactive about taking on more important responsibilities, but then also making this a habit. And so now the question becomes how? How do you be aware? How do you be proactive? How do you be persistent? Let's talk about how to be aware. The first is to identify a lot of the opportunities that, once again, are around you all the time. And I split these into opt-out opportunities, which I think of as you're already in these situations right now. It might be next door. It might be in the meeting that you have this afternoon. And there are opt-in opportunities where you may not be invited, but there is an opportunity for you to get invited. Now, what are those opportunities? The first is to actually just build relationships and to turn a hi, a stranger, into a hello. So if you find yourself with anyone you know, even just taking the step of saying, hey, I just came across this and I thought I would share this information with you, now gives you permission to continue the conversation with them. Let's say you're in a meeting with someone. Don't be shy about reaching out to them, especially one-on-one, where if you follow up with them and say, I loved that presentation, again, that's an excuse to build a relationship. If you find yourself, this actually happened to me a number of times, where you have someone who's CC'd in the email. You're now in touch with them, even if you're not in touch with them directly. And if you know them and you see them again, you can say, I couldn't help but notice that we're both in this meeting or in this task force. Or if there is someone who sends an all staff email, this is a big hidden opportunity where people might often send a farewell email when they're leaving. And you might think, well, this person is no longer in my organization, but that relationship can last a lifetime still. So if someone joins the team, send them an email and say, let me know if I can ever be helpful. Welcome to the team, which I suspect many of you are already doing. But even if someone leaves and sends a farewell email, let them know, I would love to stay in touch. Here's my contact information. Find them on LinkedIn, add them to LinkedIn, and stay in touch with them. You never know where they might go. If there's someone that you only met online, especially if you're working, for example, across continents, across countries, but you're now going to be in the office, for example, in Aminata's case, maybe traveling to the United States, to London, to Senegal. If there's someone that you have not yet met, say, I just want to put a face to a name. I would love to meet you in person. If you are traveling for work, consider traveling with someone else and say, hello, nice to meet you. I would love to maybe share a ride to the airport. And if you find someone you can bump into in the hallway, even just saying a good morning, which I realize may be unintuitive given the cultural context. But once again, you need to go from invisible to visible. And then there are opportunities that you're already invited to, but that you have to still show up at. For example, if there is a senior executive who is doing a presentation, one of the easiest ways to build a relationship is to ask a question, to introduce yourself, and then to send the thank you email. If there's a volunteer opportunity with your company, you can now join that organization, that volunteer initiative. And oftentimes, every volunteer initiative, especially in the corporate setting, has an executive sponsor. And you being able to go to that executive sponsor and say, hi, I don't think we've met. I'm so-and-so. Nice to meet you, can build a relationship. If there are corporate citizenship initiatives, for example, employee resource groups or other volunteer efforts, and if you see someone that you worked with that you might see again, you can say, well, did I see you at that all hands last week? Just wanted to say hello. If there's happy hours, if there are cross-functional projects, if there's a chance for you to work across countries, across teams, across departments, ask, how can I be helpful? Let me know if I can ever be helpful. And this is also a big opportunity, is anyone in your internal directory that you have access to, and you finding them and saying, like you, I also am a PhD. I'm also working in a corporate setting. I switched to industry. I would love to put a face to a name. I would love to hear your story. I would love to see where I can be helpful. And then anyone who used to work in your organization. I noticed that a large share of you might be interested in moving to another organization, or if you're not interested now, maybe later. Anyone who used to work at your organization, you now have permission to reach out and say, hello, I also used to work at Orange. And that initially will allow you to say, I want to follow in your footsteps. I would love to have a conversation. And so once again, your first challenge is to just turn silence into a conversation, to go from unknown to known, to go from silent to heard. And there are a number of ways to increase your odds of finding these hidden opportunities. If you are in the office, I heard from a marketing analyst actually in Ghana, who said that he, and actually there's a woman who did this as well, who sat in a high traffic area. Actually, both individuals sat, they had an open seating plan in a small organization, and everyone was too worried about sitting close to the corner office of the CEO. They sat there, and every morning they just said hello, and just like that, they were able to build a relationship. If there are email threads, group threads, WhatsApp threads, beyond those, you never know what opportunities could be shared. If there's a meeting that you are invited to, consider arriving several minutes late, or rather early. And then on number 4 is stay late after meetings. That's where we want to be late. Stay late for a few minutes and see if there's another follow-up conversation that you can have. Or you can look left, look right, and say, hi, I really liked your comment earlier. Look for people who don't seem like they're in a hurry. If you're attending, for example, a conference, if there's an opportunity for you to be the only person who knows someone else, you can be a +1. So get invited by someone else. And through that individual, through that friend or colleague, meet other people. And then, of course, once again, research people and reach out to them if you find that they have a path that relates to you. Now, that's all in just being aware that every individual that you meet, every relationship that you build could turn into an opportunity, and you just never know. And if there is something, you just have to show up, and you need to make yourself available and to make your desires known. The next is to be proactive. And what you want is to turn a high into a high again. I could imagine that when it came to Aminata's story, it's unlikely that she could have just said hi to someone and through one single hello, turn that into a CEO role. It takes time. It takes weeks and months and years to build a relationship with someone. How do you do that? Well, one is to say hello if you see them again by saying hi again. If you meet them on video chat, consider direct messaging them and saying, nice to see you again. Send a thank you email of thank you for the conversation earlier. I love that we're both from Nigeria and we're now both working in London, for example. Ask how something went. If you happen to know, for example, that this individual was traveling abroad. You can say, in this case, how was the wedding? Or how was the business trip? This is a big one. Share information that might be relevant to this person. So if you find an article, if you find a podcast, a YouTube video, you can say, I just came across this and was reminded of our conversation about this, which shows that you're thoughtful enough to consider them and competent enough and proactive enough to be continually educating yourself. Number 6 is invite this person to opportunities. This happened recently where I was invited, but I could not make it to an event. And I thought, hey, what if I could invite someone else? I may not be able to make it, but let me know if it's of interest. And then finally, number 7 is to offer to introduce two people who might be helpful to each other, where you can say, I recently met so-and-so. I'm not sure if this would be relevant to you, but she also went from here to there. Let me know if it'd be helpful for me to reach out, and I can ask if they would like to have a conversation with you. And once you're proactive about nurturing these relationships and turning a single hello into multiple hellos, it's time to make it a relationship and to keep that relationship alive. And when it comes to turning this hi again into a let's chat, this is where maybe 1 or 2 people you meet will end up becoming invested in you, invested in your career, and you become allies. You go from just saying hello to so much more than that. And one great way to involve someone in your career and to turn them into that ally is to ask for their input. You can say, for example, I've been working on this initiative and I would love your perspective since you are the expert on this topic. Or you can ask for their advice. And you can say, I'm trying to stand up a new committee for my nonprofit, and I would love to get your advice on this. Might you have a few minutes to chat? Or you can ask for their story. You can say, I'd love to follow in your footsteps, going from working in the UK to returning home to Senegal. Might you have a few minutes to chat? I'm available at these times. Or you can ask for their involvement. You can say, I'm recruiting advisors to guide the direction of this mobile money platform. And I immediately thought of you given our conversation at this conference. So your goal is to find a reason, a compelling reason for both of you to build a one-on-one relationship, especially a sustained one-on-one relationship. And once you have this habit of, well, bringing more people into building a relationship, you might just have one person at any given time, or maybe none at all. And maybe that person will come your way in a few weeks or a few months' time. But if you find someone, as I suspect was the case with Aminata, who had a sponsor, who had someone higher up in the organization, who is invested in her and invested in her career, this is where you have the potential to really build a lifelong mentorship relationship that may also open doors for you. So if you do have this person who is several years ahead of you, who is higher up in the organization, who has the ability to bang on the table and say, I want you to get this job, share your goals. Let them know that as I reflect on where I'd like to be 5 years from now, where I'd really like to be is to be the general manager of our country in this company. What is your advice on what I should start doing, stop doing, and keep doing to attain such a goal? If you don't let others know of what you want, it's very hard for them to advocate for you and to keep you in mind. The second is to share your progress. Once you've heard from them and gotten their advice, next, you want to keep them up to date. You don't just want to have one conversation and then disappear. You want to say, I had my performance evaluation and it was all thanks to you. I was told that I should speak up more. And so next quarter, what I plan to do is to come to every meeting more prepared. No need to reply unless you'd like to, but I just want to keep you in the loop that I hope to build more of a point of view. And it's all thanks to the guidance that you had given to me. And then C is to share your struggles. Now, it takes time. It takes a relationship really to share your struggles so vulnerably. But once you find that person, it may be time to involve them more deeply in your life, where you can say, I was reflecting on my performance in this prior client presentation, and I feel like I could have done a better job of maybe treating it not as a presentation, but as a discussion. Am I thinking about this the right way? Or what would you do differently if you were in my position? Now, again, it takes vulnerability, but some people really do act and behave well and respond favorably when people come to them with some thoughtfulness, with a desire to improve, to learn, to succeed. And again, your goal here is to give others ideas on how they can support you. And you want to also make them feel good about what they've done, how they've made an impact on you. And hopefully you want them to make an impact on you going forward. And so I'm talking to you about here really three strategies that won't happen overnight, that won't necessarily get you promoted to CEO overnight. But over the course of nurturing these relationships, maybe that opportunity will come your way. Or when that opportunity doesn't come your way and you see that opportunity, you will have the relationships, you will have the awareness, you will have the allies, and you will have the sponsors saying, I know exactly the person that I want to be leading this effort. Let me contact her right now. And so there's a lot, right? And those of you who've attended one of my prior sessions with Africa.com will know that not only does this not happen overnight, it's also not something that is ever too late to try and to start. Many of you are already into your careers, whether it's several years or even several decades. And you might think to yourself, well, actually, I could have gotten to this big time promotion if only I had done this earlier. Well, if you find yourself maybe feeling regretful, feeling behind, remember this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So don't worry about that relationship that you maybe could have sparked a year ago. Or maybe you sparked that relationship a year ago, but you haven't yet sent a follow-up email to them. Here's your chance. Here's your chance to plant that seed, to plant that tree. And just like any tree, it will take time to grow and to blossom. So take those baby steps, reignite that relationship, say hello, share a goal, ask for their advice, share some information with them, thank them, introduce someone to them. And before you know it, you will have an entire network, an entire forest of opportunities that you have sown for yourself due to little behavior changes and additions and mindset shifts starting today. And so I'm curious, what seeds will you plant? And I want all of you to think about just one thing that you hope to do differently, or one key strategy that you're going to take away. And go ahead and share it with me here. I'm curious, what was your biggest takeaway from today's session? What is one thing that maybe you'll try? And let me know how you performed on. I'm seeing here looking for a sponsor, being proactive, having patience. Stop being so antisocial. As someone who is shy and introverted, I could so relate. But it's important to be visible, not invisible, to share your goals, to contact people, to be more open about myself, to be aware, to not back off, to make your presence felt, to sell yourself and sell your ideas. And it all starts from just saying hello and then being proactive along the way. And that, yes, you're not alone. That proactivity can serve you well no matter where you are and where you are in your career. And not doing this to burn yourself out, because there are a lot of relationships that you could build, but being intentional and strategic about who you want to meet, who those people know, who those people could introduce you to, what opportunities and doors they can open up for you. And so one of the doors that I would like to open with all of you is the door to stay in touch with me. And so if at least a fraction of what I shared today was relevant to you all, I hope that you will give me some quick feedback on how today's session went. If you want additional resources on how to grow your career, share your email with me and I can be in touch with additional resources. And I will share all of this feedback with the Africa.com team so we can better serve you. So don't be invisible to us. Please, please, please stay in touch and let us know how we did today. And if at least a fraction of what I shared was relevant to you, I hope you'll check out my book and online course, which is on my website, gorick.com. Tell a friend about my work, sign up for my email list, which you can do in the link, poll everywhere, pollev.com/Gorick. And of course, connect with me on social media. I will be starting a YouTube series shortly, and I just look forward to staying in touch. And with that, I want to hand it back to Teresa and to, if we have time, to also take some of your questions. But once again, thank you so much for participating today, for being so engaged. And I look forward to staying in touch with all of you and hearing about the great impact that you will have in your careers.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gorik. I'm sure that everybody found that as helpful as I did. Let's ask a couple of questions that have come up. I thought there were some really interesting ones that it would be helpful to get you to react to. One person said, Gorik, if you went silent on a sponsor, what do you do to rebuild the relationship again?
That's a great question, and honestly, one that I can relate to as well, where I had a good conversation with someone, I got busy or I forgot. And now I feel like, well, is it too late? Do they already have a bad impression of me? Well, one of the things that I found helpful is to just be honest and to say, I've been thinking about you recently. Dear so-and-so, dear Teresa, I was thinking about you recently, and it just occurred to me that the very advice that you had given to me a year ago has actually gone on to lead to a promotion at work. And it was all thanks to the conversation that we had. And I was looking back at our email thread, and my heart sank because the first reaction, the first observation that I had was, I forgot to follow up with you and to let you know how things were going. I'm so deeply sorry for having forgotten to follow up, but I wanted to let you know that your impact on my life and my career has been enduring. And I would, well, one, just like to share with you the impact that you've had. And two, maybe share with you a quick update on what I'm thinking about next. I would love to send you an email update if your schedule doesn't permit for us to catch up, but if your schedule does permit, I'd love to update you as well. Either way, just want to let you know that I'm grateful for your contributions, for your advice, for your guidance, for your mentorship, and I'm still thinking of you. So I completely just made that up. Please use your own words. Please use your own voice. Please make this email your own. But I found that that can be effective. And Teresa, if I could perhaps toss this back to you, because I used you as an example here. Have you ever had that happen? And how did you find yourself reigniting that relationship?
Yeah, I think you gave a very good answer. And I think what's interesting about it is that it's always not just about your career. This is something that happens institutionally as well. You can have a company that has clients or sponsors for the company that you fall out of touch with, and you need to do the exact same thing. I was thinking as you were speaking about an NGO that hasn't been in touch with its donors and needs to reignite those relationships. So I think that the overall principles of what you just described are precisely what's necessary in all of these cases, whether it's a corporation or a small business that needs to go back to a client that they have ignored, or an individual talking to a sponsor, or an NGO speaking to a donor. I think that it's around, number one, acknowledging what has happened, taking responsibility for it, and finding, as you said, a creative way to make a connection between the past, the present, and the future. So I think that your guidance was very useful, as I said, across many potential use cases. All right.
That.
So here's another interesting question about relationships from a remote. How do you build relationships when you're a remote worker in a company and you haven't yet met your teammates? How do you do this? A lot of your examples are around live events, but if you're working remotely, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking back to the one individual. I suspect you're not the only one, by the way, who said, stop being so antisocial. Whether it's because you're shy or because you're introverted or because you don't know anyone and you're not sure of how you'll come across, actually working in a remote environment is a pro and not a con. It's a strength, not a weakness, because the value of working remotely is you now have an opportunity to build a one-on-one relationship without having to be in a big crowd. So you don't have to be the person to have fought over and won over dozens of people in a large group setting. You can now contact just one person. And that's actually my advice, which is find someone that you, for example, the example raised was you don't know your teammates yet, or you've never met your teammates. If you have already received some information on who your teammates might be, I would encourage you to write an email to each of them and to say, "Dear Nelly, my name is so-and-so, and I'll be joining the team starting next Tuesday. I was looking through some of the onboarding documents that were shared with me, and I noticed that we'll be working closely with each other. Uh, I know it's only probably a matter of time before we have a chance to work together, but I wanted to first reach out and introduce myself and to let you know that I too actually am from Sierra Leone, and I'm now working in London. So it sounds like we already have a great deal in common. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better." So you may not get a response to such an email, but even just introducing yourself can go a really long way. Now, what if you don't know who's going to be on your team yet? Well, this is where you can look up people who currently work at your company or who previously worked at this company. And I actually want to touch upon the people who used to work at your company, because that's a hidden opportunity. I was talking to a young professional who had gotten an internship at a company that she was unfortunately not that excited about. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to work there full time. And we were strategizing about, well, how do you make the most of this experience, even if you're not that excited? And we started realizing together that actually this job might be temporary, but the relationships you can build will outlast anything, will outlast any project. So what she did was she went onto LinkedIn. She searched for former employees of her company. And you can do this by searching, going into an advanced search, using all filters and searching for people and their past companies, and search in and type in the past company of where you work, or the past organization where you work, or that you're currently joining and that this person used to work at. And you can see, for example, this person found 1,000 former employees of this company. And one of them actually happens to work in another company that she's interested in. So what she said was, she wrote that email and said, "Hi, so-and-so, like you, I also graduated from this school and I'm now starting here. As I think about what I'd like to do next, where I'd like to see myself maybe in 5-10 years is actually in following your footsteps. So I would love if you have a few minutes to share your story with me and how you made the choice to go from here to here. I'd love to hear your feedback and to also get your advice." And again, not everyone will respond because many people are busy. Everyone's busy. But one of these people really did respond. And fast forward, she ended up getting a job in this other company. So you never really know who might respond. And it starts with just figuring out that you can actually contact anyone you want.
I think that's all great advice, Gorick. And this person is coming to the question with, the remote world is obviously very different. And if you allow me to add my 2 cents to what you,
Please.
I think the other thing that has been surprising for me is how relationships can be built over Zoom. So for example, this is our 3rd time working together, and I feel like I know you very well, and we've never met in person. So I think that another thing that you can do as a remote worker is see if you might ask one of your colleagues, hey, use Gorick strategies, but instead of doing it in person, say, would you have 10 minutes next Tuesday, so that I could chat with you about X, Y, and Z? We could do it on Zoom or FaceTime or Google Meets or whatever platform is available for you and your colleagues. And then I just find that these relationships that we made coming out of the pandemic over Zoom have surprising similarity to relationships that are established in the real world. So I would really encourage people to go one-on-one and virtual.
I love that, Teresa. And you're completely right. I've just, our relationship has blossomed beyond my wildest dreams. And we have not yet met in person. And as I think about the people that I most closely contact these days, 9 out of 10 of them, I may have not actually met before in person. The challenge, but also the opportunity to building a relationship remotely is finding a project. It can sometimes be challenging to just contact someone and to ask for a call without an agenda. And oftentimes, especially if the other person is busy, it's unlikely that someone will say, well, I don't know if I have time to chat just for an hour about anything, especially if there isn't a specific ask. So if you're reaching out to someone, if there's a project that you're working on, I noticed that we have a number of entrepreneurs in the audience. We have a number of leaders of nonprofits. If there's an initiative that you would like this person's involvement in, that now provides you with really the basis for a conversation. And if not, share specifically why you're reaching out and what questions you like to discuss. Just being very specific about why you're reaching out and why this person specifically can increase your odds of the other person responding versus just I'm intrigued by your path and I would love to learn from you. That may often be too vague of an ask and not lead to many responses.
Good. Another question we have from the audience that I think is an interesting question, and that is, Gorick, how do you approach being proactive in a company culture, a corporate culture that frowns upon proactive behavior from its employees?
That's a tough question because unfortunately, well, it's a tough question, but it's also a question that I get a lot. And I have two threads to this response. The first is that so many of these unspoken rules ultimately revolve around stepping up without overstepping. So there is oftentimes an unspoken rule that you will not speak to your manager's manager unless you first go through your manager. So if that happens to be the case for you, you have to be careful about reaching out to someone that one of your managers may see as a threatful act. And so I would look to some of the highest performers on your team and in your department and in your organization and see how are they navigating these relationships. Oftentimes you might, for example, get an assigned mentor, and that assigned mentor might introduce you to someone, in which case that's another avenue you can take. Or there is an opportunity that has come your way and you can volunteer. So you're not proactively reaching out, you're just responding to what's come. Or you can start off by inviting yourself to be a note taker. This actually happened with a woman that I spoke to, an accountant, where she noticed that her manager was always going to a set of meetings every week. And she just thought, I'd love to, I know you have a busy schedule and I happen to have some extra time. Would it be helpful if I joined you in this meeting and took notes and maybe helped you with some of the follow-ups? And so you're providing this you're providing your proactivity and presenting in a way that helps other people as well. In doing so, she got herself invited to this meeting. And actually what she realized was when she arrived in that meeting, that one of her coworkers who had been promoted several times and on an accelerated schedule had been attending those meetings for years. So you never know who may have invited themselves to these meetings. And then finally, the second thread of this answer is, think about the corporate culture that you work in. Not, as I said earlier, not every place is going to be the perfect place for you. So you may realize that actually this is not the place where I can grow. And maybe it's time to look for a place that is more in alignment with your values, that values proactivity, who will really cherish and embrace and promote people like you who are proactive. That may be something to consider as well, making sure that you're just positioning yourself for success. And that requires being in an organization that wants you to be successful. And Teresa, you've probably encountered this a great deal in all of the roles that you've had. How do you step up without overstepping? What have you found helpful and not helpful?
I think that you've hit it, or it's really very much dependent on the both sides of the equation. The person who is making the move and the person who is receiving the move. And I think that having a high level of emotional intelligence will help you to read whether your actions are being perceived as overly aggressive or just assertive. Because that's how I often think about it, is that assertive is okay, aggressive is not. And I think that is very much individual specific. And I can think of a woman, one of our senior executives at Africa.com, who was looking for a job when she came out of university. And I think she just walked that fine line between being assertive and aggressive perfectly well. She contacted me, and at the time I didn't have a job, and she said, do you mind if I stay in touch with you? And we were in touch, and she contacted me once a month very consistently to see if there was an opportunity. And she was always polite, but very firm. I'm still looking for a job. Please let me know if you have an opportunity. And I then walked into a meeting about 6 months later. We decided that we were going to hire someone. And I really didn't have anyone in mind. I had a lot of things in my head, wasn't thinking about this one person. And then she sent that email. I got it soon after I sat back down at my desk. And it was just perfect timing. I said, oh, right, this is someone who, has been looking for a job and has the right background. And so I've been working with this person for what is about going 16, 17 years now. And that's how it started, was, figuring out how to be appropriately assertive.
I love that, Teresa. Thank you for sharing that story.
Here's another question for you, Gorik. Do you recommend use of social media like Twitter for professional networking? Will the recipient consider you as serious, or is that inappropriate for networking?
I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Teresa. I would say that it really depends on the industry. So many professional industries will use LinkedIn. In fact, will use email. So you may find someone on LinkedIn, but you may realize in scrolling through their profile that they haven't updated their LinkedIn profile recently, or it doesn't seem like they post at all, or they don't have many connections despite being in the position that they're in. So if you're seeing, for example, someone only has 200, several hundred followers or connections, it doesn't seem like they've updated their profile recently. It doesn't seem like they post at all. It may be the case that you just created a profile but haven't been maintaining it. In which case you have to find a way to get into their inbox, because even if you sent them a direct message, they may not be seeing it because they're not logging in. But LinkedIn in general is a great place to start for the corporate world. There are other social media platforms, as we all know, and you'll see, for example, that a lot of creators, a lot of social media people, a lot of marketing people, a lot of creative industries, photographers, designers, architects, a lot of their networking, producers, especially in media, a lot of them will network through Instagram. And because they're more visual in the work that they do. I mean, I've networked with a lot of photographers and videographers using Instagram, because there's no reason for them to have a LinkedIn account. They need to show their work, and Instagram is the place where you do so. There are other places. I mean, if you are a content creator, you may not believe me, but networking happens on TikTok and on Facebook and on YouTube. And the way that people do that is by doing collaborations. They, for example, will invite someone to be a guest on their show if they're creating a podcast or an interview series. And so if you're in those creative industries, look at where others in your industry frequent. And then also maybe ask around to a friend or two to see, hey, what are the ways that you keep your network alive? And you may realize that it's actually not on LinkedIn, it's maybe on Instagram.
Good. Here's another question for you, Gorik, career guru. How do you reinvent yourself at a later age if you missed out on starting your career off right early in the early stages of life?
Teresa, this is definitely a question I want to bounce back to you. My quick reaction here is there's so many ways to think about reinventing yourself. And without knowing your specific circumstances, I can only provide you with a few frameworks to think about. One way of thinking about where to take your career next is, do you want to be an operator, an advisor, or an investor? And thinking about reinvention, well, a lot of people later on in their careers may go from running a business or doing the operations of a business to advising a business, and that takes on a different life of its own. That could be one way of reinventing yourself. Another way of reinventing yourself is by pursuing a side project that you can then turn into your full-time project. I call this turning your side hustle into your main hustle, where you may have a particular job, but there may be a passion of yours on the side, and you may want to pursue it on nights and weekends and build a team. And if it goes anywhere, you can then turn that into your next career. Another form of reinvention, if you're looking to stay in the corporate setting or stay in an organizational setting, is to think about the world as being a combination of rows and columns, where the rows represent industries and the columns represent functions. Industry is a fancy way of saying a domain of the marketplace, of the economy. You may have oil and gas, you may have insurance, you may have financial services, you may have technology, you may have education. Those are all industries. But within every industry are going to be different functions. And functions is a fancy way of saying department. So you may have worked in engineering, in research and development, in sales, in marketing, in human resources, in operations, in facilities. Reinvention can often come in the form of switching an industry or switching a function. And so if you work, for example, in pharmaceutical sales, maybe you can be sales in a technology company, or you can go from pharmaceutical sales to pharmaceutical marketing. In general, it's going to be easiest if you're reinventing yourself by not changing a function or an industry, so going from one pharmaceutical sales role to another. Secondarily, it's going to be slightly more difficult, but this is where the reinvention magic happens, is by switching either industry or function. When you say reinvention, it may be the case that you're thinking about, well, I want to leave this industry and I want to leave this function. In which case, oftentimes it's going to be rather challenging, especially later on in your career where you've built a track record and a resume. So take it step by step. Switch one first if you're struggling to switch everything. Get a toehold into your next opportunity, and then use that to then create your next opportunity. So that's how I think about it from a framework perspective. But Teresa, I'm wondering if you have an anecdote, or if you have frameworks or suggestions that you would give to your own mentees and colleagues who are looking to do the same.
Now, I'm not a professional career advisor the way you are. I think that you've answered the question very well. I will simply add, I think that thinking about the frameworks that you provided, I can think of many people who have followed different paths that you just described, including turning a side hustle into a main hustle, including having to perhaps start off at a lower place than you would expect given your age and your tenure, and having to work your way back up. I think sometimes it takes a great deal of humility to start off, because you may have to work for someone who is younger than you are, and that has its own dynamic. But being able to demonstrate a willingness to just focus on the work and not get hung up on those sorts of issues, I have found to be an essential piece of getting back into an organizational framework, working in a corporation or organization, and demonstrating your value. Because oftentimes when you're older, there are many additional assets that you bring to the workplace. Besides a narrow skill set, you have additional wisdom, additional experience in life, and can be more helpful to an organization. And figuring out how to communicate that during an interview, show your value. You know, this comes up a lot for women who may have taken time off to raise families, making sure that you are able to show that you've been learning during those years, and that they haven't been just a wasteland. And I think also I would speak to, we have about 20% of the people who come to these sessions, by the way, we target them for women, but we find that we get about 20% of the people who are with us are men. I think it's also about men and women having respect, and women too, having respect for those who have taken time off to focus on family, whether it be children or elderly parents who needed care. I think being open and understanding and having empathy for the way that our lives all evolve is a part of what we as society need to do in order to welcome those very valuable members of the workforce back into the productive work environment. So those are my comments there. I want to address one question that has been asked here, and this might be getting close to our last question. And Gorick, I'm going to take this one and I'd be happy. I'll take it, but I'd be happy to have you add on. And one of the questions that someone has asked is, as a woman in an African country, reaching out to people can sometimes be interpreted as seduction. Any tips on how to prevent that? As part of my work with the Africa.com definitive list of women CEOs, I call each and every woman who is on our list, who has reached the pinnacle of corporate success in Africa. They each are the CEO, like Aminata. I mean, imagine 75 to 100 Aminatas. They are each the CEO of a listed company with revenue of over $100 million. And I called to congratulate them on having achieved this great accomplishment. One of the things that has been surprising is this very issue that someone on the call is raising today. Each one of these women speaks about how they can't network as their male counterparts could network. And you're sort of surprised because you think, boy, everybody knows that you're the CEO of this big company. And so if you might invite the head of the client out to dinner, it's perfectly obvious that that would be for business purposes. But I've heard from many of these women that this is an issue. And so I just want to acknowledge that I think that all of this has to be taken into context. And even at the highest levels of corporate Africa, being proactive can be misinterpreted across gender lines. And so the advice that I would simply have is to do what you need to do to accomplish your goals. Don't be fearful, but also be mindful of the realities and make sure that any invitations that you make are done across email, that you are meeting in public, not in perhaps a private office, but maybe meeting in a conference room with a boardroom with the doors open, maybe inviting more than one person to the meeting, maybe taking along a colleague to the meeting, a junior colleague, perhaps, or someone else who might be helpful, someone who may come along to take notes, or someone who might have more to contribute to the conversation, so as to just make sure that those signals are not crossed. And it's really quite surprising that in 2023, this is still the case. But I just want, for this person who's asked this question, I want you to know that you are not alone, and that women at the highest levels in corporate Africa find that challenging. So I wish you success as you go about implementing the recommendations through today, but want to acknowledge that it isn't always as easy as it may sound, and you definitely need to take steps to ensure that you don't have any hiccups along the way. Gorik, is there anything you want to add to that?
I so appreciate, Teresa, you calling out this question and then also responding to it, because I've heard of these challenges as well, and they're real and they're unfortunately very frequent. Everything you said, I 100% stand by as well. Two additional considerations is, to your point about, number one, to your point about it being a matter of culture and context, there may be other colleagues of yours who don't have this mindset, especially if you, for example, work in a global organization. Working with colleagues who may be from another country or another culture, understanding how they network and how they build relationships and whether there may be such a bias can be helpful. If they don't have a bias, that may be an opportunity for you to build a relationship with someone who may not misconstrue your signals. The second is, and I'm so thrilled to see the chat window blowing up with LinkedIn invitations and introductions, because this is a community. And this is a community of ambitious, hardworking, talented, intelligent women who want to go places and who are going places, and who are embracing a conversation like this. So if anything, this is a great community to start with, fellow women who are climbers and strivers. So there may be additional opportunities that you're already exposed to that just needs you to take that extra step, if you may be facing some of the biases that Teresa and this individual talked about.
Wonderful. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap here. Gorik, thank you again. I send out an appreciation to Aminata, who I've been texting. during the course of this session, and having thanked her for her wonderful kickoff to this session. And Warwick, thank you for bringing your technology. Thanks for bringing your interactivity. Thanks for bringing your book, your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience to this. And I'm sure this will not be the last one. We will look towards towards the future with you. Everyone always finds these sessions to be very helpful. I'll mention to everyone, you'll get a link asking you afterwards to complete a survey. We really read them. We read all of your comments. We share them with Warwick and with Aminata. And we use it to inform our next session. So thank you for being here. I wish you all success in your corporate careers, and please continue to visit us at africa.com. I'll do a quick commercial for April 19th. We will be revealing the 2023 definitive list of women CEOs. The list has expanded and changed quite a bit from last year. And in addition to revealing the women who lead corporate Africa, this year we're adding an entirely new dimension, which is we are looking at the performance of women on the companies we are looking at the performance of companies led by women in Africa, looking at how their share prices perform in 2022 compared to their male counterparts. Spoiler alert, the women have done well, but come find out the details. So if you've signed up for this, you will receive an invitation for April 19th. It's going to be a very dynamic session where we are going to have Vera Songwe, who is the former head of the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa. We will have the head of the African Women's Impact Fund. We will have one of the top performing women on the list, Owen, who is the CEO of Transcorp in Nigeria. We are going to have a special guest from the United States, Patricia Lizarraga, who is the founder of the Women CEO Index in the US and the investment fund that invests in women-owned companies in the US. So it's going to be another super dynamic program. Please join us. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.